Good day, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Here Comes the Judge with the Yogi Judge. I'm Judge Dawson, and I'll tell you, first of all, I am just honored that you've given me this brief opportunity to spend some time with you to talk about some subjects that I think are important to empowering your mind. Now, of course, you know I'm a yogi as well as a judge, so sometimes we'll talk about things that will empower the body and the mind but at least for this brief moment, I want to focus on some things that will strengthen us as people as well as a community. So again, I thank you for tuning in to our podcast of Here Comes the Judge today. And I want to talk to you about something that is near and dear to my heart. And why is it near and dear to my heart, you may ask? It's because I am a judge of the people, a judge for the people. I do not take it for granted that I've been given this opportunity to be a judge. So I try to spend every moment empowering people. And I recently had a conversation with a young man, 16 years old, and he told me that he was married, not to a woman, not to a career, but married to the street life. He was married to the street life. And it really disappointed me because in 2019, moving into 2020 and beyond, we have the ability to accomplish any and everything that our heart desires. But instead, some of us have this desire, the street life mentality. So let me tell you how this entire topic began. We started because we were talking about taking responsibility, right? And everybody was on the same page. Taking responsibility means owning up to your stuff, right? Being a man or being a woman, being a parent, being a good employee or an employer. Taking responsibility means that you are owning up to your duty and you're executing on it well, right? So that's where we started. We started with a very simple premise and we ended up talking about the street life. Why? Because that's my duty as a judge. I know that this particular conversation with these young men that I was talking to at the time that led to the conversation with the single young man, they are in trouble with the legal system. So what I did was I started general with taking responsibility and what that means. And I ended up very specifically saying, okay, now how does this relate to the crime life, the criminal activity, the street life that he claimed to be married to? How do the two of these relate? And basically that young man switched it on me and said, taking responsibility on the street is different than taking responsibility in your regular life. He went on to say, basically, that if you tell on somebody in the streets, that's snitching. And of course, we've all heard the term snitching. But what really disappointed me the most about this conversation was how he applied snitching to his life. He basically took the position that no matter what the situation is, he's not going to tell on anyone about anything. And it doesn't matter what I say or what anyone says. And let me make this very specific so you can follow this journey with me. I gave them the example of a car being pulled over, 4 people in the car, and the gun, yes, I threw in a gun, being found in the center console, right in between everyone. And the question became, and the debate became, about when a police officer pulls that car over, who is supposed to say the gun is mine? Now, in a perfect world, the person who owns the gun would do what? Take responsibility, right? But say if he doesn't. The question was, are you going to tell whose gun it is? And that young man said, no matter what, under no circumstances, the code of the street is not to tell whose gun it is. That he would be a man because that's the life he chose. And I said to him, well, hey, doesn't that work 2 ways? If that's the life that you chose, what about the person who owns the gun? Didn't they choose to buy the gun, to bring it in the car? Isn't that the life that they chose? So being a man is stepping up to that responsibility and saying, hey, that's my weapon. It doesn't belong to anybody else. I don't want anybody else to go to jail. But the young man didn't see it that way. He basically said that he would do time instead of mentioning who the right owner of the gun is. And I broke it down even further. I said, so let's say if it's you and me. I'm Judge Dawson. You and I know each other. They walk in this room, find a gun. If I say that is not my gun, the gun belongs to him, am I doing the right thing? That young man said, nope, Judge Dawson, you would be snitching and you would be violating the code of the street. And I said, but hold on. Look at the other coin. Look at the other side of the coin. Shouldn't you own up to the fact that it's your gun? I mean, if you are a real G, as he kept saying, a real gangster, wouldn't you say, hey, that's not Judge Dawson's gun, it's my gun? And that, ladies and gentlemen, is my problem. We have so many young men and women who are willing to throw their lives away for the code of the street because they don't want to be snitches, yet they don't expect the person who is totally responsible for the offense to step up to the plate and say it's mine. My drugs, my gun. I stole that from so-and-so. So you have people who are willing to throw their lives away for the same person who is not willing to stand up for you when they know it was their offense in the first place. And that really broke my heart because this young man was 16 years old. And he said, this is the life I chose. And I chose this life when I was 14. I said, oh, okay, so you are an OG. You got 2 years in the game. And you've dedicated your life to this street life so much so that under no circumstances, and I gave him a million examples, will you tell on someone so that you can secure a positive future for your life. But instead, you will uphold the code of the street, or at least your version of the code of the street. Because we all know, I mean, whether you watch it on TV or experience it in your real life, there is no code when it comes to people protecting themselves and looking out for their best interest. I mean, really, you have to look out for your own best interest. But the bottom line in this particular situation is that this young man at the age of 16 was willing to throw his entire life away because he felt taking responsibility is going to jail. But instead, what I wanted to leave him with and what I will leave you with, and I need you to spread this information to anybody you know that is teetering on the line of hanging with the wrong people or being with the wrong crowd or just needs to hear this information. It's not a long podcast. They can listen to it. They can give me 10 minutes of their life. And what I needed him to understand is that taking responsibility means securing a positive future for you and your family. Taking responsibility means that you understand that you were not born to go to jail or to be in jail. So in order to take responsibility and honor the life that you've been given, you have to be positive and live a positive life. And if you've made a mistake that it caused you to be wrapped up in the legal system, taking responsibility means getting back on your feet, getting back out there in the community and not doing the same thing again. It does not mean throwing your life away at the age of 16, 17, 18. I don't care how old you are. Throwing your life away for this so-called quote unquote street code. Now, let me say this. If you are involved in street life, criminal activity, and you get caught, all I'm saying is man up to your stuff. That's all I'm saying. Because if you man up and take responsibility for what you're doing, then someone else doesn't have to snitch. Now, there's an entirely different topic about someone who shifts the blame. Now, that's totally different. And we can talk about that later. You know, kind of like the joke said, hey, you know, Chris Rock did this parody of being pulled over and he said, hey, officer, I don't have a valid license. And guess what? The person riding next to me has weed in his pocket. Now, that's totally different. I'm not saying that you should try to better your situation by putting somebody else down or throwing somebody under the bus. What I'm saying is if you are caught and you've done wrong, man up. Take responsibility so that no one else in that car in your car or on your bus of life, no one else has to suffer for the mistakes that you've made. So, as I conclude this podcast, I think it's important to understand my points. My takeaway is this. At the age of 16, nobody should be so married to the street that they're willing to give up their future. And if that's your nephew, cousin, son, daughter, whatever it is, as parents, as adults, we have work to do because that young man needs to value his future a little better. Second point, if you get caught doing something wrong, don't let it be a mystery as to who's in trouble. Man up to your stuff. Those were my drugs. That was my gun. Man up to it. And then the third point, don't engage in foolery. If you get in trouble for something, don't then shift the blame to somebody else and throw them under the bus. Now that's worse than snitching. I mean, that's just not being a man, not being a woman, not accepting responsibility. Think about it. If I'm running stop signs in Arizona, I'm not going to say to the police officers, hey, there are a bunch of people in Ohio that's running stop signs right now, and I can give you a visual on them. I mean, I know that's a very interesting example, but you get my point. Take responsibility for what you've done. Be a man. And most importantly, be a woman or man who takes responsibility for your life. Don't suffer consequences that you don't need to suffer. And that all starts with finishing first. Now, I know this is a topic that can't be discussed in just one podcast. I mean, so many emotions, so many things to think about. But that's my point. I want to get you thinking about it. All right. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Here Comes the Judge. I value your time. I'm going to always try to give you a quick hit of something that we can use or something that we can talk about. So continue to listen to the show because I appreciate you. Hit that subscription button on iTunes so that we can stay together and grow together. And most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, continue to be the best that you can be. And until we meet again, I say to you, namaste.